We're back. We're at episode
Hi.
5. We made it through the holidays. Well, we already made it through the holidays when we
Yeah,
launched the podcast.
it's a new
Well,
year.
yeah, and the kids
Yeah,
went back to school. That happened.
they did. I know mine are still at my house though, going to school, but you
Ouch.
forget. Yeah,
I do forget. I know.
it's okay though. They're doing so great. Honestly, we're like speaking because this is about the power of habit.
Mhm.
Um, when we first started homeschooling, it was really very difficult, mentally exhausting, taxing, until we got into sort of a routine and understood how everything was working. And so now we went back to school, and this week was beautiful because we knew what to expect, how to do it. Like, this is totally not planned. I just want to be clear. I did not talk about homeschooling to segue into, just like in what the last episode we were talking about the Jonas Brothers unintentionally, but it just happened.
To-
So,
Totally just happened. I mean, I think you're right. Like there are habits that have been formed that forced upon us in 2020 in regards to schooling our children and their
yes,
new habits. And at first we fought them, and now
yes,
they have stuck just in time for the kids to go back to in-person school soon.
yes. Yeah, so funny. But you're
It is
right.
so
We
funny.
have had to change a lot of habits in 2020. Um However, so part of the reason that we decided to do this podcast is in the last one, I don't even remember what we were talking about, but we talked about, I think I was saying, well, we both love coffee. I love bacon. And then you don't eat bacon, which is a tragedy. And I'm sorry, my opinion. But you love avocado. Well, we both love avocados, but you love them even more because
You know,
you
I actually
are
even love
just
fried avocados. They're really bad for you, but I
you
love them. They're like avocado fries.
dipped
Have you
in
ever had that?
ranch.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yes, or vegan ranch.
Yeah.
Ah,
It's like a
so yeah.
buzzkill every time you're like, "Turkey, I mean tofurkey." I'm like, "What is that?" Well, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you do keep catching me off guard.
I'm so
So,
offended. Well, but I just roll like I'm like, you want to talk about coffee and bacon and avocado? We're doing it. Let's have a whole episode
yes,
about those three things. But really, when we thought about what those three things really stood for, they
yes,
probably, we thought maybe there's a bigger message behind this, and we could
yes,
talk about a concept that we're calling the power of habit.
yes. Really, if you look at it, avocado, bacon, coffee are the ABCs of habit. Not really. I mean, I'm stretching it here, but we should let's
Okay,
talk about the
that's a
power
takeaway. That is a takeaway.
of habit.
Boom. Holy cow. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in the topic of habit, being a high performer in life, which
Mhm.
you are as well. And everyone listening, hey, if you're listening to this, we know
Yeah.
you're high performers because hey, who better to listen to than me and Sarah shoot this shit about
Mhm.
habits. But the truth is, when you create positive habits in your life, it makes you feel good. When you have negative habits in your life, you don't feel so good. And we've
Mhm.
all hit times in our lives when those negative habits have somehow been created and then they stuck for whatever reason. We didn't catch them in time, or they felt good, so we kept them going. And
Mhm.
every once in a while, it's time to get rid of those negative habits and replace them with positives. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about maybe even starting with the science behind habit. What do you think?
I think that's great. Well, because you've been doing some research for this episode, which I love, to really be able to talk about the science. So yeah, take it away, sister.
Well, it's really cool. Like, I would say at least 5 years ago, I bought this book called The Power of Habit. It's by a guy named Charles Duhigg. I think that's how you say his name. And I bought it because it's a business book. It's about why we
Uh-huh.
do what we do in life and business, right? So it's
Mhm.
both. But I was kind of in my head going, how can I get 10 million more women to make it a habit to buy skirt sports every couple months. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, that's kind of it's important to continue to think about business in all kinds of different ways.
Absolutely.
So that, and in your world, it's about how do I get more people to make it a habit to want to do races? That was what it used to
Mhm.
be, right?
Right? Before they were all canceled. Yes.
Right. And so now it's how do you get people to make it a habit to set running goals that don't involve races or
Mhm.
find other ways that they can include running in their life that you can support them with.
Right. Well, and I think in general, just even looking, with the book that you're talking about is exactly the type of book that I like to read all the time as well. I don't know why, but I actually find it fun and and interesting. But just even the study of how habit fits into our everyday life is it's fascinating because really our life is made up of tiny little habits, right?
Yes, every single thing you do, from like you put the toothpaste on the toothbrush and brush your teeth at the same point in the day, at the same slot in the evening after you got the kid, like
Yeah.
all these little things become habit, whether they're intentional or not. And after a long time, you don't even think about them anymore. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I mean, think about the highest performance athletes in the world and the sports teams out there. I mean, if all they did was focus on habit to the point where when I was a swimmer growing up,
Mhm.
you needed to get to a point where you didn't even have to think. The gun went off, you did your race, you finished. You're like, that happened because it's so ingrained. The
Yep.
exact number of strokes, the way your
Yeah.
feet hit the wall, the push off, how many kicks underwater, like when you breathe, that is so ingrained by habit and by practice that you don't even think about it at the end of the day.
Exactly. Right, and there was at some point in your life that you never swam. Like, you didn't swim, you actually had to train yourself, from never having swam to then to where you were an actual expert and, had all these habits. So, there is it's easy to think sometimes, "Well, I have this habit, and, well, I've just always done that. It's just always been that way," but it really hasn't. And as a mother of children, I am visually watching, training them, with habits. So I train them to brush their teeth and floss them. At the beginning, it was a fight. Oh, it was a fight. It was terrible. And now, you know, um, now they'll do it. My son he'll brush his teeth, he'll floss his teeth on his own, and but it took a time to train them, and as adults, so I mean, we're not even aware of how many habits we have that actually make up our day.
Well, it's so true. And, we think of habits as the things we do, right?
Hmm.
Or the coffee we go to, or the things we crave and whatever, and how we include those things in our lives. But habits are also about how the way your brain sort of reacts. It can be emotional too. Like,
Hmm.
Tim and I have very different techniques and skills.
Hmm.
And I'm much more of a nurturer, and he's much more of like a disciplinarian and a more disciplined kind of person. And so whenever I see him putting down the discipline hammer on Wilder, my mind immediately goes to interject, get in there, soften the moment. Don't create tension around this thing that in my head doesn't seem important, but that's a habit that I have developed over time. And it's
Right.
not a habit that I want to continue. So I have to work hard to once you're aware of your habits, which is actually the number one thing to identifying the ones that you want to include in your life and the ones that you don't want to include, is actually being aware of them. Once you're actually aware of those habits, then you can start the process of either getting rid of them or solidifying them even further, expanding on them, which is really cool.
Mhm. Well, and I think a lot of times we only become aware of our habits when they become a pain point in our life when they don't serve us anymore. You know, if in those interjections in Tim's parenting, there's him being upset with you after, or there's something that happens that it doesn't serve you anymore, then it's like, oh well, this doesn't work for me anymore. I want to change this habit, but it's often not until it becomes negative that we become aware that we even have it.
Yeah, I think you're right on. And I think it might be a good point too to talk about what what is habit comprised of? Because at the end of the day, what happens is your brain starts to create pathways that make these habits more comfortable, easy, more natural for you. And those pathways can be changed, but it does require work to change them. So basically, as far as there are probably many philosophies out there, but from the reading I've done, there's something that's called the habit loop. And so there's three parts to the loop, and all three parts can be changed and adjusted based on what your goals are. So the first thing is the cue. So the cue, you see or feel or hear or smell the cue. Then you do a routine. That's the habit part. And at the end is a reward. So can you think of an example in your life where like there's a cue, you do a routine and there's a reward?
So like I smell bacon cooking,
Uh-huh.
then I want to eat it, and that is the reward.
Well, maybe the cue is that you see it in the fridge and you're
Mhm.
like, "Oh, the bacon's in there." So the
Right.
routine is that you cook it up and the reward is you feel satiated or happy.
Right.
Tastes good.
And I think, I mean, I'm joke because we titled this, with bacon and coffee and things like that, but um, I have I think you know this, I don't know that everyone knows, but I used to be a very heavy smoker at one point in my life. And so there would be a cue, my body would sort of cue me like, hey, it's time to do this. And then, my routine would be that I would smoke. It's just even bizarre to say this now. It's been over 8 years since, actually, I think it's been 10 years since I quit. And then the reward was, which they've shown through research of smoking, a release of dopamine, right? So the reward
Correct.
was that my body would be like, "Oh, this is great," and this feels good, and all of that. So I think that's more of what you're talking about. There's the cue, then there's the routine, and
Right.
then there's the reward from
And the
that.
cue could be that you see the pack of cigarettes on the counter, or the cue could be that you finish your last bite of food. And then
Right.
you're like, "Oh, I'm done eating. That's my cue. Now I get my cigarette, I go outside, I do my routine," or whatever it
Yes.
was, and then you feel that happy hormone rush through your body.
Right. And you're right. The cues were very clear. When I got up in the morning and had coffee, when uh if I had a drink after I ate. I mean, yes, the cues were, you're right, they and much like you as a swimmer, at some point never swam in your life. I wasn't born smoking,
Right.
right? So there was at some point in my life where it became the cues and the routines and the reward kept happening so that it became ingrained in my life. So it was very much a habit.
Well,
Probably the hardest one I've had to
and
break.
this one toes the line between an addiction. So there is a line between habits and addiction. And I mean, this book actually, The Power of Habit, talks about alcoholism and Alcoholics Anonymous as the ultimate habit creation organization, because there's a fourth thing going on with this. You have a cue, you have your routine, you have your reward. Well, once you do it enough times for it to stick, and I think with things like smoking cigarettes, which actually have like a chemical in them, and drinking alcohol or doing things that are more of a chemical addiction, they stick faster. right? Whereas making going
Interesting.
out and making running a part of your daily routine, that might take longer to stick because of the fourth part, which is the craving. So once you do it enough times to know that the reward will be there for you, you start to anticipate that the reward is coming, and that makes you start to crave it. And once you start to crave something, then a habit really does start to stick. So there's all these studies about like how long does it take for a habit to stick? And they're like 21 days. Well, it's not a perfect science, right? It's not
Right.
exactly 3 weeks. It could be a year, for certain things to really get a habit to stick. But I believe that a habit is going to stick once you finally trigger that craving piece. But the interesting thing is that you need to identify what the actual craving is for, because a craving can be like a finish line. Like running might be all about the feeling you get crossing a finish line or a finish line medal. It might be like, I'm
That's
craving
a real
getting
thing. I
the
think
medal.
there might be. I
Uh-huh.
think
It's
that
a
might
real
believe.
it is a real thing, I know,
Mhm.
and your beautiful medals show it. But a craving could also be like, escape. You may crave escape, and that
Mhm.
might be the reason why you drink. Or you might crave stimulation, and so there's different things here that can come into play. And once you actually figure out what the craving that you're trying to satisfy at the end of the day is, then you can work on changing that habit. Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting, and I wanna go back to what you said because I think that it's really powerful, is there's a difference between, habit and addiction. So, can we just talk about that a little bit? So, w what is what is that fine line? What's the difference? Because habits really be they can eventually lead to addiction, but is a habit something that you do every day? Is it a habit? Is a habit something that what's the difference between those 2?
I don't have a really great answer. I feel like addictions are more chemical. Like, it's all chemical because it's all
Mhm.
about how your brain is creating pathways to get
Yeah.
you to make decisions and do certain activities. But I feel like an addiction, you maybe start to feel powerless to stop it, or it's
Mhm.
like you need help stopping. It's harder to stop when it's an
Right.
addiction, I think. And you can get addicted to pretty much just about
Yeah.
anything. And in fact, we
Right?
throw that word around like, I'm a solitaire addict, or, I'm
I don't
I'm a
think I've ever
Game of
said that.
Thrones addict or whatever.
Right.
Right, but that's we're playing with that term there, but it definitely does not have a positive connotation to be addicted to
Mhm.
something, do you think?
No, absolutely not. I don't think so at all. So, and I think so to I think what you're saying is that a habit is something that we have a lot more control over, right?
Yeah.
And based on what you're saying, with a habit loop, there's a cue, a routine, a reward, and to really get a habit ingrained to where when you're describing swimming, it's something you don't even think about. Um, you have to do it long enough that you begin to crave it. So let's say you want to be more hydrated, which is a huge thing. We talk a lot about, just from a health perspective, drinking more water, right? So maybe it doesn't feel good at the beginning. To drink more water, but it seems like the longer that you continue to do it, then at some point you begin to actually crave that additional water. You're like, "Oh, I feel dehydrated. I want to be drinking more, water." It becomes a habit. And then once you get that ingrained, so the craving is there, is really then I think when habits can become powerful, right? Because
Yeah.
when you instill positive habits, you don't necessarily have to think about them anymore. You're just doing them. And in fact, you want to do them, which is really, I think, the place that we want to get to is creating those positive habits and then weeding out the negative ones that don't feel good.
Well, you're so right. And it's so interesting, like with the hydration habit, for instance, the cue is easy. You put a water bottle right next to the sink, and then you can even write yourself a note on the door that says, "Don't forget your water bottle." And you just always bring it with you everywhere you go. The cue is like the water bottle, the routine
Right.
is bringing it, right?
Right.
And the reward is how you feel. And you're right. Like, think about anybody you know who's done a sugar detox. Like, we are so ramped up on sugar all the time, right? All
Mhm.
of us. And then the day you go off sugar, you feel horrible, but, like, 2 weeks later, you're like, "Oh my god, this fruit, it's never tasted so good. I've never really
Right.
tasted this bell pepper before." And then you have more sugar and you're like, "It doesn't even taste that good." You know,
Right.
it's kind of a really interesting one, at least, I think from a taste bud standpoint, like, your
Mhm.
body knows. As yeah.
Well, I think it sheds light on the fact that, we think our habits are who we are, right? So, "Oh, I love sugar. Oh, I love," whatever it is. But really, it's our habits that have created that, and to your point, if you begin to change that habit, you actually don't want sugar. You actually don't want these things, that aren't serving you. So and you said this to me before we even jumped on the podcast. You said, actually, our lives are made up of little habits every single day. So, I think it's easy for us to say sometimes, "Oh, well, I can't have this," or "I'm not doing that," or, um, "Well, my life isn't what I want it to be because of X, Y, and Z." But really, I mean, I think we have the power to change and be who we want to be, and that can be done one little habit at a time, right? And it takes
Yeah.
time. It's not like you can change a habit in a week. And you said kind of the cue is, well, let's put a water bottle out there. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to change a habit, but I don't do it. It doesn't matter. Um, it doesn't matter if I lay my clothes out in the morning to go for a run, or if I have I can write it on my refrigerator 99 times, but if I'm not committed to it, if it's not meaningful, if I'm not, or really, if I've not broken it down into small enough steps where I can make it become, um, a habit that I don't even think about, um, it's gonna be hard for me to overcome it, if that makes sense, right? So
Yeah.
sorry,
No, it makes total sense, but it also makes me think, I guess one of the questions is it easier to stop a bad habit or easier to start a good habit? Maybe you could
I
share
don't
how
know.
you actually stopped smoking because you mentioned it. I think
Yes.
that's a good one to start with. Like, how did you kick that one?
So that is that's a funny story, is what it is. So I always knew I wanted to have kids. And I sort of, I guess, understood that, I would stop smoking once I were to get pregnant or something along those lines. So because I had tried to quit a million times before then, but it was sort of time to start trying to get pregnant. And so I had actually whittled down my smoking from a pack a day. It's so embarrassing to say this on, but it was a lot to, maybe 2 to 3 a day. So there was kind of very much, I was every day, and it was very painful to do so, because, well, an interesting thought is, or an interesting thing to share was, it wasn't just that I was addicted to, the nicotine per se, but I am shy and introverted by nature, and smoking would give me something to do. It was a way for me, especially in social interactions. It was like it was something that came between me and other people because I always felt awkward about what to say and how to have a conversation and things like that, which is ridiculous because here I'm on a podcast, but it's actually easier for me to do this than it is to sit in like a group with, 5 to 10 people and somehow try to continue a conversation going on. So there was this like emotional component to it as well that I was having to learn to overcome. And so I had agreed to quit smoking. We had actually gone on a cruise, and I I was supposed to stop smoking as soon as we came back, but I had actually stashed a pack at my office, um, because I didn't really actually intend to quit. And but so I left. So the day that I was supposed to quit smoking, I left my house, and I wasn't, I don't know, like 2 blocks away from my house when I actually light a cigarette. And again, it feels wrong to like to talk about this on this podcast, but this is a true story. So I'm just going to share about it. And so I'm sitting at a stoplight, and as I'm sitting there, um, window is rolled down. I'm just, unabashedly smoking away, even though I had promised I was quitting that day. And a giant like F-350 truck runs a stoplight in front of me and T-bones a car. And the guy in the truck comes directly at my car. He happens to turn his wheel enough so that he misses me sitting on the driver's side and goes about, I don't know, 6 to 12 inches behind me and hits my the gas tank instead. Right. So my life has just been spared. Um, un, and it was scary and traumatic and all of this. And now I have to call my wife to say, you got to come pick me up. I obviously smell like cigarettes, so I'm trying to like get all that done. But I felt like it was a sign, and I had to stop. So I actually called my office mate at the time and I said, I need you to get this pack of cigarettes. I need you to throw it away, get rid of it. I'm never touching these again. And I literally felt like it was a sign that you almost died, Sarah. And so that was when I actually stopped. That was like
That was
10
your
years
last
ago.
cigarette?
Hmm.
The
It
one
was.
in the car seconds while you were being T-boned?
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
It was. It was. And um, I, I'm, I think I think, if I had gotten pregnant, I would have stopped for sure. But it was such a sign to me, and it was such a powerful addiction and habit, that it took something that dramatic for me to be able to stop. Um, so, and that's a funny story sometimes too. So,
Sarah, that is incredible, but it is
right?
it's a really, I'm glad that guy hit you.
I think,
You will
I
not
mean,
be here as long
I
if
would
you
have
had
killed
kept
myself.
smoking. Yes.
Exactly. Well, and as I had to change my habits. I had to stop doing, because I was so committed to changing that one habit. I actually had to change a number of other things. I I really struggled to drink coffee in the morning. I stopped drinking altogether because the two were so tied together for me. Um, I had to change a multitude of other habits to support that one big habit change. And it took a long time to do it, and I think that's something to consider is that it took, I mean, that was a habit that was what, 10 to 12 years in the making. So it doesn't go away right away. So I think if you're trying to change a negative habit, and a habit about eating, a habit about, how you are, to your point, how you are with your family or parenting styles, we want that immediate relief, that immediate change without realizing. And we have another podcast coming up called The Power of Persistence, right? And this idea of just continuing to show up, right? Where you want to change something in your life and you expect it to change without realizing if it took you a year to build it, it may take that much time to get it away. And it's the beginning part that's so hard to change. Once you get through those first few weeks, then you really can have these habits, I think, that are ingrained and become instilled in your psyche and your being, and it's something that you just do naturally, you know?
Well, you're right. And I do think there is a form of discipline that has to come, and it's a bit painful and there's discomfort in the beginning. And you think about New Year's resolutions,
Right?
our conversation about goals and mantras and stuff. I mean, they often fail because people don't stick with them when it gets painful and when it's not comfortable. But the
Yeah.
longer you stick with them, you can tweak these little cues, you can tweak your routines, you can tweak the reward until you are just as satisfied as you were
Yes.
before. And that's really the trick.
Yeah, and I think it's so easy to feel like you failed if you don't meet if you wanna change something or there's a goal and, "Oh, well, I just don't have enough willpower. Oh, I just don't have enough," whatever it is, but maybe it's that you need to break down the habit even further, right? So let's say you wanna lose weight. The habit to change is not necessarily, "Oh, well, let me put less food in my mouth," right? Because there may be a million cues and habits, just like with the smoking. It
Mhm.
wasn't just stop putting that in your mouth. It was change the other things that were supporting that habit. So if you wanna lose weight, drink more water first. That's the first habit that you need, right? And then
Yeah, that's a
can I
great
eat
point.
more vegetables? Can I it's not you haven't failed. It's that you need the it has to be broken down in ways that are can be implemented into your daily life where they become natural, and
Right.
then you're doing you have the habits that support the overall goal and habit that you want to obtain.
Well,
Does
and
that
that's the
make sense?
point. I think the goal piece. So maybe sometimes changing a habit might mean making a goal that's totally different. So if you
Yes.
want to lose weight, maybe your goal is to do a marathon or a trek across, your state, or do something that's going to require you to be healthy and strong to do it. And
Mhm.
then as you've set that goal, some of these other habits, like you can't be a cigarette smoker and do a marathon. I mean, you can
I
probably
mean, I
in
did a lot of half
Europe.
marathons.
Yeah, you might have done one too. But for the most part, like you're
Yes,
gonna find that you've got to release some of these other habits that are gonna hold you back from reaching a goal. But it
yes.
it is interesting because there are certain things like there's the concept of guilty pleasures. And I
Mhm,
love guilty pleasures, and that's coffee and bacon and avocado, right?
mhm. Maybe not avocado. Avocado's, like, good for you, I think.
Fried avocado sticks, you might love those in ranch, real ranch.
Yes,
Um, but, there's these guilty pleasures in our lives too, and what we need to do is not make ourselves feel guilty by
right.
partaking in the occasional guilty pleasure, and that
Exactly.
having a cheat day or whatever is not gonna break your habit unless you let it. Unless you
Right.
decide, okay, I've broken everything. So I'm just going to let my brain rework its pathways to the dark side again, like get back on the
Right.
train.
But when you have a habit that's ingrained, a cheat day doesn't break it.
Right.
It doesn't because you're already doing the behaviors that you want to do. You are you and you've if you've ingrained it enough, you're craving vegetables, you're craving the fruits, you're craving the foods that your body should be having.
True. You're
Um,
craving the way your body feels. You're
exactly.
craving how well you sleep because
Yeah.
you ate well. Like you're craving self satisfaction,
Yes. Yes. And I do think it's important too that we look at how some of these habits serve us emotionally. So, over the last year or so, I've learned a lot about numbing behaviors, those sorts of things that we've learned, whether it's through our childhood or even our adulthood. We don't like the way we feel, right? And emotionally, there's like a hole, or and it's actually, I've been noticing this a lot more now that I've come to understand them. I'm like, oh, I don't know what I was feeling, but it felt weird and I didn't like it. And so I'll cover it up with something, rather than being able to experience the emotion. Again, I don't know what it is. I can't quite name it, but I know it feels, maybe it doesn't even feel bad. It just feels uncomfortable. And so, I'll be like, "Oh, well, let me just go eat some food," right? Because that will numb whatever feeling I was having. Or, I've noticed that more now with, wine for me, during the pandemic and sort of being overloaded and all that. Okay, I have these feelings, I don't know what to do with them. Let me numb them with
Right.
something else. Um, so I think we sometimes build habits where we don't even realize that we're doing that to numb some of what we're feeling emotionally. So I think it's good to sit with, if there's a habit that you want to change, sit with it, right? You don't have to go to, we're action women, right? Like, let's make a plan and let's do this and it's like, okay, what's really happening though? Because then a lot of times we make the plan without fully understanding what created the habit in the first place. And then we're trying to solve for something that we're going to fail at. And then we feel crappy about ourselves at the end of the day. Like, we need to give ourselves the time to sit with it and say, what am I feeling? Why don't I like this habit? What does this habit serve? Whether it's emotional, physical, whatever. What's the craving that I have, that, or the cue that covers it up? And then, um, so why do I have it? What's the why? What's the why behind why you have that habit? And um and then, try to work it out and fix it, rather than just thinking, oh, I'm lazy, I'm a slob, I'm fat, I'm whatever, terrible things we tell ourselves inside. Like, we're not that thing, we're none of that. But maybe we can figure out w- why have we created what we've created, as our life.
You're right. And, I believe truly that the more we can share the things that we're feeling negative about, if we're
Yeah.
talking about the bad habits, the way our path has rolled along, the more we can share that, the more we realize we're not alone. And then we can draw from other people's experiences. And I mean, the Zuma community, the skirt community, the
Mhm.
most inclusive, positive, supportive communities I've ever been around. And
Absolutely.
you need to find a safe place where you can put yourself out there, because that negative head talk is what holds us back from making positive change.
Yes, I agree completely. And a lot of our challenges are built around that. Is like right now, we're in the middle of the Love Run Challenge, which is a run streak. So 45 days, you run or walk 15 minutes or a mile at the very least, right? And as a way to begin to ingrain habits, a positive habit of moving. And we do it at the beginning of the year because everyone wants to set their New Year's resolutions. And then before you know it, there's a group of women who are all getting out there. I swear half of the reason that Zuma challenges are effective is like peer pressure guilt, because you go in the groups and you're like, oh, that person, they ran today, so I should probably get out. But whatever it takes, you commit daily to just a little bit of something, and before you know it, something has changed and you're on a path to positivity. So, anyways, I digress. I get excited about our Zuma challenges, but yes, you're right. Having a community to support you, I think, is a huge piece in wanting to change, to change a habit.
Well,
So,
let's just say that we have all, in addition to being masters of change, thanks to 2020, are all masters of habit change because it forced us to change a lot of things about our daily lives and the bigger picture. And
yeah,
whether you know it or not, if you do, like you said, if you can find it within yourself to sit with some of these habits that you would like to either build upon or decrease, figure out what the craving is. What are you really seeking? Because
right.
once we figure out what we're really seeking from all the coffee and the bacon and the avocados and the cigarettes and the alcohol and the wine and and the running and
Mhm.
whatever else it is, once you figure out what you're really seeking, then you can make the steps to change it or blow it up and make it bigger.
Exactly.
I love it.
I you know what I think an important question to ask too is, do I want to make the change? Not, do other people think I should change? Do other people think this habit? But do I want it? Because I think that at the end of the day is your biggest motivator. When you want it, you can, then it does become powerful. Then you're willing to commit. And if you don't want it, that's okay as well. But to really be successful in changing, or to your point, blowing out some of these habits, you have to make sure it's something you want, as well, you know?
Well,
Just
then let's just get back to this. We
yeah.
are all craving to look and feel good in our bodies, and the clothing we put on them helps us do that. So, I'm going to say that creating a habit to keep yourself updated on the best athletic wear in the market is a good habit to make in 2021 so you can go after all of your dreams and feel good every day. What do you think, Sarah?
I think that is great, especially if we are talking about skirt sports,
That's the only thing we're
which is
talking about.
about our store is about to relaunch again, which is so exciting. So I agree. Let's make that a habit to
Awesome. And you
check out.
cannot make it a habit if it's not available. But if you are listening to this, then hopefully you are on the Zuma or Skirt Sports email list. And if you aren't,
Mhm.
get on there right now, zumarun.com or skirtsports.com, and sign up for the emails because Sarah is going to push enter very soon. And you're going to see all kinds of really cool stuff because the spring 21 line is just about
Yeah.
to land.
Oh, and it is amazing. It's so cute. Well, you tried them on already. You've been checking them out and making sure they fit right,
You
all of
know,
that.
it's interesting. This is the end of the transition seasons. I mean,
Yeah.
I worked hard on the spring 21 line last year at this time basically,
Yeah.
and we stopped it because Skirt Sports was, in a transition. And so you
Mhm.
kind of picked it up and ran with it, and it's coming to fruition
I
in
know.
kind of a really cool hybrid model. Like it's got both of our I don't know, both of our creative touches. So I think it's really cool, and everybody listening needs to at least see it. I mean, come on. But
Absolutely.
once you start reading the reviews, it's all over. This stuff does make you feel good.
It does.
It's a
It does.
drug.
I
It's
love
an
it.
addiction. Let's go all the way back. Let's get real.
Yeah, the only addiction that we're approving of is the skirt sports addiction. That is on the list of approved things.
Ah, I approve.
Right.
Awesome. So, what do you think, Sarah? Do you think it's time for the takeaways?
Yeah, it's funny because I normally have some solid takeaways, and I don't have any of them written down. So maybe do you have a takeaway?
I do have maybe one takeaway, which would
Okay.
be if you are looking to stop a bad habit, one strategy would be to try to replace it with a good habit instead of leaving like a big gaping hole in your life. So that could be one thing. So,
I like that
boom.
one.
Hmm.
I think that makes, so it's not just that you're, like you said, if you put together a goal to, you want to run a race, or you want to do something, and that requires you to stop one of the habits that you have, that is a really positive, and proven way to help
Yes,
put a new habit into place.
definitely.
I think another takeaway that I would note on here is that our lives are made up of little micro habits. So take the time to think about your life in that way, which would lead me to the third takeaway, which is our big habits are also made up of little micro habits. So to change the big ones, sometimes you have to look at the little ones. And then also that sometimes our habits serve to cover up, numb, or somehow make us feel better emotionally. And that's different for everyone, but it's an important thing to unpack as you look at how you want to instill the power of habit in your life and um, how you want to go about your daily life. So, yeah.
Very well said. I'm going to add something at the end here, which is stick with it, because habits don't form in one day for most human beings. It takes time to create that loop and create that craving that's going to trigger it all. And if it's not working, I want to include a meditation practice in my life. Well, I meditate like twice a month. Like it's not working. So you need to think about doing something, changing one part of it, either change the cue, change the routine, or change the reward, and play around with that habit loop until you find one that sticks and works for you. So stick with it and play around with it. Sometimes it takes time.
And Nicole, we are talking about in one of our next podcasts, not the next one, but I think two from here, the power of persistence and how to keep showing up. So I think if you can check us out on that episode as well, because it really will back up what we're talking about here with habits, right? It's
You
that
got it.
showing up, be persistent. So we'll see you on that episode as well.
I feel like today was a little bit, it crossed the therapy line a teeny
Oh,
bit.
did
Thanks
it?
for sharing your smoking story. Like, everything is so much deeper. And all we're trying to do is share with you some thoughts and ways that can make your life a little bit better, make you feel better about yourself, make you happier. And if
Yeah.
you got one thing out of today that you can work on to make yourself a little bit better, then we're happy.
Yeah. Thanks
Cool.
for joining us today. If you like this episode, we'd love for you to leave us a review and 5 stars and subscribe so that you will get all of the latest episodes as they pop up. We are trying to publish this weekly. So far, we've been knocking it out, but
We've been
we'll
knocking
see
it out.
if the power of our podcast habit will continue. will continue through.
Perfect.
So we'll
All
see you on
right.
the next episode. Thanks for joining us.
Over and out. She runs it.
Bye.